7 p.m. is the scariest hour of the day in this forgotten village. For over 400 years, it's been cursed by an evil spirit that turns anyone who enters it into stone. Locals claim that the entire town was turned to stone at 7 p.m., except for one girl who escaped. But what really happened to her? And will you be next if you enter the village at 7 p.m.? Let's find out in today's scary story, which is actually a viewer-suggested story from our community. Our community member, Brandon Matthews, suggests we do a video on the haunting hour. So here we are doing a video about what happens at 7 p.m. in the Forgotten Village. But before we get into the story, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you enjoy the stories that we tell, please support us because it helps a lot. Deep in the Romanian countryside, there is a village that has long been abandoned. It sits deep in the Carpathian mountains, a place shrouded in mystery and folklore. Over the past few centuries, many strange things have supposedly happened here, but all of them pale in comparison to what happens every single day at precisely 7 o'clock in the evening. Legend has it that when the clock tower chimes 7 times at precisely 7 p.m., everyone inside the village is instantly turned to stone. This curse has been around since 1624, when an evil spirit known as the Lorax, or she-wolf, descended upon the town and petrified almost everyone. Only one young girl managed to escape the curse, but she made a terrible mistake that doomed her to wander the earth for eternity. Now, every day at 7 p.m., the spirit returns and claims another victim, turning them into stone like the rest of the villagers. And it's all because of the one girl's mistake. In order to understand why this curse was placed upon the village in the first place, we need to go back to the beginning. Back then, the village was called Viscri, and it sat nestled in the mountains just as it does now. But instead of being abandoned, it was home to hundreds of people living their lives. But life wasn't always easy back then, especially if you were a woman. There were very few rights and even fewer freedoms. This caused a great deal of anger to build up inside the women of Viscri, and they longed for someone to release them from their shackles. And one day, they got their wish. An old woman wandered through the village, claiming that she was a powerful witch and could do magic. She told the women of Viscri that she would help relieve their pain and free them from their oppressors. And while most of the townspeople viewed her with suspicion, the women welcomed her with open arms. The old woman gathered all of the women in the village together and told them that tomorrow night at exactly 7 p.m., she would perform a ritual that would grant them freedom. All they had to do was meet her in the town square and bring an offering of wine and bread. So at precisely 7 p.m., all of the women gathered in the town square carrying their offerings. But when the old woman saw how much wine and bread they brought, she realized that she couldn't possibly use it all in her ritual. That's when she came up with a plan. She told the women that she needed more power to perform the ritual and asked them to go into the forest and find a small cave where an animal had recently died. They should take some of the offerings with them and leave them in the cave. Then they should come back to the town square and wait for her to tell them that the ritual was ready to begin. They did everything the woman told them to do and waited patiently in the town square. But when the old woman returned from the cave, she brought something with her. As soon as she stepped into the town square, she threw the offering into the air and let out a blood-curdling scream. The women screamed back, and the old woman raised her hands, unleashing a wave of dark energy that swept through the town square. Wherever the energy touched, the people turned to stone. Within seconds, every woman in the village, along with several men, were turned to stone. The old woman cackled maniacally, reveling in her victory. She approached the remaining townspeople and told them that if they wanted to save themselves, they had to flee the village and never return. If they set foot in Viscri again, they would also become cursed and turned to stone. The townspeople didn't know what to do. They were faced with two terrible options: either run away and abandon the village or stay and turn to stone. In the end, most of the people chose to flee, but a few stayed behind, including one young girl named Eliza. As the dark energy touched her, she felt herself turn to stone, and yet somehow she remained conscious. She watched as the remaining townspeople fled, knowing that she wouldn't survive the night. With no one else left in the village, the old woman finished her ritual and vanished into the night, leaving behind only a faint whisper. At 7 p.m., I shall return. And with that, she disappeared. Eliza was trapped in her stone prison, forced to watch as the sun rose and set every day for the next 400 years. She watched as animals ran through the empty streets, as trees grew and withered, and as seasons turned into decades. She knew that someday the curse would be broken, and she waited patiently for her release. But every night at 7 p.m., she had to relive the terror of being turned to stone. She heard the clock tower chime 7 times, and then everything went black. When she regained consciousness, the sun was already out, and she was still trapped in her stone prison. She watched as the years turned into decades and eventually centuries. But then one day, everything changed. One morning, a group of hikers stumbled upon the village. They were shocked to see the perfectly preserved town and the hundreds of statues that stood in the streets and homes. But they didn't realize that these statues were cursed. They explored the village and took pictures, completely unaware that they were walking among cursed objects. One of the hikers found a small cottage on the outskirts of town and decided to take a closer look. He opened the door and walked inside, completely unaware that he was about to break a 400-year-old curse. Inside the cottage, the hikers found a diary that detailed the entire story of Viscri and its curse. They read about the awful woman who turned the townspeople to stone and about the girl who was cursed to relive the nightmare every day at 7 p.m. They also learned that the curse could only be broken if someone willingly entered the village at 7 p.m. and stayed until sunrise. This meant that someone would have to spend the entire night in the cursed village and wait until morning without turning to stone. If they could do this, the curse would be lifted and the people of Viscri would finally be free. But no one wanted to take the risk. They were afraid that they might turn to stone and become trapped forever. That is, except for one girl. One of the hikers was a young woman who had heard the legend of Viscri and wanted to see it for herself. She was skeptical of the story, but intrigued enough to explore the village. She had no idea that she was about to become the key to breaking a 400-year-old curse. As soon as she entered the village, she felt a dark presence watching her. She could feel the evil spirit lurking in the shadows, waiting for her to make a mistake. She tried to ignore it and continued exploring the village, but the feeling only intensified. As the sun began to set, she knew that she had to make a decision. Should she stay and risk turning to stone, or leave and let the curse continue? In the end, she decided to stay. She knew that she might not survive the night, but she was willing to take the risk. She found a place to hide and waited for the sun to go down. As soon as the last rays of sunlight disappeared, the temperature dropped and she could feel the evil spirit closing in on her. She huddled in her hiding spot and waited, knowing that when the clock struck 7, everything would change. And just as the clock chimed 7 times, she felt herself turn to stone. But miraculously, she remained conscious. She watched as the spirit approached her, and she could feel its evil thoughts invading her mind, but she didn't panic. She had prepared for this moment, and she knew what she had to do. She closed her eyes and concentrated, reaching out with her mind to fight against the spirit. She pushed back against its evil thoughts, refusing to let it consume her. And slowly but surely, she began to win the battle. The spirit screamed in anger and frustration as it realized that it couldn't control her. It lashed out one last time, but she held firm and the spirit was banished. With the spirit gone, the curse was broken. The girl opened her eyes and looked around. She could feel the warmth of the sun on her skin and the soft grass beneath her. She had survived the night, and the curse was lifted. She ran through the village, freeing the people from their stone prisons. They were finally free after 400 years. But the girl knew that she had to leave. She couldn't stay in the village after what had happened, so she said goodbye to the people of Viscri and vanished into the mountains. The people of Viscri were forever grateful to her, but no one ever knew her name or where she came from. Some say that she was a hero who came from another world to save Viscri. Others believe that she was a descendant of one of the original villagers, destined to break the curse. But whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: at 7 p.m., in the Forgotten Village, the curse has been lifted. Now it's time for you to tell us your story. Have you ever experienced anything strange or supernatural? If so, share your story with us in the comments below. And if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe for more scary stories.